heard you guys.
Oh, I know. Of course, next week.
I
will be
don't
beautiful.
remember. She was over Christmas.
I can't remember.
Good evening. Beth, can I have another pen? This one back. Maybe I'll just borrow Katie's for a minute.
Yeah, I just have one though.
If that was
I'd like to call tonight's policy meeting to order. On the agenda tonight is policy review.
Paul, are you going to take minutes tonight, or notes?
Sure.
I'd be happy to, but if we're in the middle of the discussion, I
Yeah,
might.
it makes it a little bit harder.
This will give me an excuse not to say a word.
No, you-
Even better. All right. Lucky you. Okay, I guess we'll lead off with Jim and give us a little direction here.
Well, as I explained at the last meeting, when we delivered these sections, hopefully you've had an opportunity to read through them now. And what we're going to do is just simply go page by page. I see a lot of sticky notes on some.
Yeah.
And we'll go page by page, and we can discuss each one as it comes up. If there's any specific questions on any policy that we cannot answer here, we can simply put that one policy on hold, and we'll visit it once we get the response or the answers to the question that we're looking at. Okay?
Now, if I'm right, my understanding the last time was you correlated this according to how it's supposed to be with an alphabet.
It's we utilize the National Education Policy Network Codification System. The acronym's NEPN. It's the national standard for policy coding.
Okay.
It's also the same codification system adopted by the Mass Department of Education
Okay.
and the dreaded EQA.
All right. All right, and then when we went, I know when I went through this, I could see where you had made a statement or a note in contrast to what we had, and then what NASC's recommendation was in order to bring it up to
And
state
in
or
some
whatever.
cases, the Foxborough policy is out of date or no longer in compliance with state and federal regulations. In some cases, it's not enough.
Okay.
It doesn't go far enough. In some cases, there was no policy in existence, so we
So you put one
supplied a
in.
template.
Okay.
And then, of course, the most important aspect of this is, does the language comply with district practice?
Okay.
Which is why the input of the administrator is valuable as we get through different sections.
Okay.
Because we don't want to establish or put a template policy in that really doesn't reflect what the district does or what the practice of the district does. Because the practice could very well be in compliance, but the language doesn't necessarily match what happens.
All right, then I guess we'll start. First paper is school district legal status.
Now, this is simply just identifying where in the law that the public school systems were created. Sometimes it's nice, again, because the policy manual is meant to be a reference document, to identify when, like in the historical note piece, maybe put in something about the Foxborough Public Schools were established in whatever that year was.
Did we bring extra copies for the audience? Okay, thank you.
Can I just,
Do you guys have a copy? Did you get one yet?
Yeah, it's just that she was coming late.
All right, so you have one.
Yeah.
Hector, do you have one? Okay, Lorraine?
Two copies.
All right, he'll make your copy right now.
so something that, like in our Foxborough handbook, which actually I don't have with me, this maybe the high school handbook, maybe we could take some of the information. When he's saying personalize, this page? Is that basically what you're saying, putting
Just,
things?
something quick in there that, the Foxborough Public School, because we talked about what, Massachusetts public school systems were established in
Right.
1647.
Right.
When the Foxborough Public School System was established in
17.
whatever year it happened to
98.
be. It was probably prior to your incorporation. I don't know if you were part of a bigger piece and broken off, or,
Is that all that necessary?
no, but it's just, again, to personalize it and make it Foxborough's page.
I think it's very nice. It's only going to be one sentence added, and to capture that, I think it's a nice thing to do. I mean, I'd be happy to check with Jack Ortholet. I'm sure he knows the exact year and may even have some more information
All right.
to put that in there.
All right, so in other words, we'll edit the historical note.
Okay.
Okay, you're in charge of that. How's that?
The cross-reference BB, where BB refers to,
A policy in section
okay.
B, policy BB, and
okay.
My only other question on this, we will personalize it, I'm assuming that in the blank
Right.
spaces, it will say specifically Foxborough,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And my only other question on that is that, in checking with all the sections that we looked at, I think we should be consistent and either call children children, which I don't prefer. I prefer to call them students. Because if you look later on, we refer to that in our strategic plan and elsewhere in other policies as students. So I know it's a nit, but I'd like to be consistent, and instead of using the word children, if we could use the word students, because you'll see that later on.
you see how that's a quote, though?
That is a
Yeah,
quote.
Right.
So you're putting that from the,
That's a quote right out of.
Yeah, so you're not going to change
Out of Mass
that.
General Law.
Yeah,
change
you're
the
not going to
quotations.
change that.
I understand.
I'm ahead of myself.
I understand.
On
You,
that
I
page,
understand
yeah.
what you're saying, but in quotations.
We can't change
I'm kind
that.
of leery
Shouldn't we
about
then
it.
state which general law that specifically is, or where that comes from?
That's what the.
That's what the
711
reference is
is.
down here,
Okay.
okay?
So that is, the quote is from MGL 71-1.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so other
But I
than,
understand the general concept that you're talking about.
all right, so other than just editing that with a historical note, we're okay with this?
But
Okay. So let me put a flag on that one. I'll put Kate on it.
I was, when I made that comment before, I think I might have been thinking about a different
got it.
policy where they were describing the school system.
Yep.
And I know that some of the language that we
Well,
use in
don't
other.
forget, when he went through this, he took into consideration our handbooks, everything else.
Yeah,
So,
right.
as we work through it, if you've got something, then we'll get into it. Okay, AB.
How would you, a quick question, should I do that and just send that to everyone, or wait until the next meeting? How would you like?
Why
to
don't you take it and send it to Jim?
Don't we want to, would we want to see it just in case?
We're going to see it before we vote on it anyways, Kate. So whatever,
Okay, send it.
okay, so send it to Jim.
On AB in section 2, where we talk about educational philosophy and goals, wouldn't that be appropriate to tie into the strategic plan and the district improvement plans?
Yeah. I think
Take
that's-
some language right out of those. I don't know if Jim has those, but we have, we do have now educational philosophy and goals. We have a strategic plan.
But we can simply cite
We can cite it,
those,
right.
not list the specific
No,
goals,
that's
but
correct.
cite the existence of.
That's
Right.
correct.
Only because, don't forget, if we're going to update it every year.
Absolutely.
Then it's going to change, so just refer to it.
Yeah, all I'm saying is the words education, philosophy, and goals could be replaced with
Just
the company,
district
the
strategic
town's strategic, the school's strategic plan and district improvement plans.
I agree, I've got that same
All right,
note, because
which-
that comes
where-
up again. Well, are we taking it, we're jumping ahead, are we?
We're on AB, I thought
Or on
Martha
AB.
said.
We're on the
Okay.
next one.
So we're going to say,
Number 2, under AB, Michelle.
number 2?
Right. First sentence, at the end of the first sentence. Basis of
No.
declared educational philosophy and goals.
So we're going to say strategic plan instead.
The
And,
basis of approved district strategic plan and district improvement plans?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we could start taking out the word children and put
Yep.
in students.
I have that written down.
My only other question, in the first paragraph, it says, when citizens elect delegates, I'm sure that goes with Mass General Law, but aren't we members? We're not quite delegates? I'm sure there's something in the law that refers to us as delegates, but aren't we members? We elect The citizens elect members to represent them.
Let's make
School
it clear,
committee-
and just say
School
elect
committee
school committee members.
Thank you. I know it's anal, but I
Nope,
thank you.
that's all right.
Where are you?
But individual school committee members?
Line 3 on the first paragraph.
Or going back? Oh,
When
right.
citizens
Just
elect-
Please indicate the paragraph.
Yeah,
Instead of
It
delegates,
makes it,
school committee members.
elect school committee members, okay.
Anything else on that page? Okay. 8C, non-discrimination.
I had a question, just because I don't know the answer. We talk about our title compliance officer. Who is that? I don't know.
while we wait for,
Michelle, do you know who that is?
Where, can you just tell me where it says so I can?
It's after number 6, there's a paragraph, the last sentence, our compliance officer.
Yes, well, someone is,
isn't it the assistant superintendent, or?
no, there's.
In
a
each school
page.
building, school principal is responsible, and for central administration, the assistant superintendent.
So
Remember,
we have multiple
we
officers?
talked about how there's
Yeah.
a Foxborough
Right,
non-discrimination policy.
right.
I can't remember.
That
what
is,
mine
Okay, I was just curious I didn't know.
is. No, I mean, I know what it, I meant, and I can't remember who the person was for that. We
But
have
there
that.
is somebody that's
Yes.
delegated to it.
Okay,
If you remember, I used this as an example
Right,
at the
yep.
last meeting, that Foxborough had one, but it's policy, it's exhibits, it's regulation.
Yeah.
So what we were gonna do is use the Foxborough document because it's fine,
right.
but just make it, just take the policy statement out of it.
Okay.
So
there's
we're
no-
not using this one?
No, but what we'll do is we'll add the legal references at the bottom
To
of the page to the Foxborough
So
document.
none of this up here
No,
is going
because
to be,
this document exists.
Okay, say that again for me, Jim. So there was no point in editing this, because this is going to be...
Yeah, we were gonna, remember, I thought we said this at the last meeting, we're gonna use the old 9100 policy.
Yep,
Which was promoting civil rights and prohibiting harassment, bullying, discrimination, and hate crimes. And take the policy statement, because this was like policy, regulations, procedures.
Everything.
Yeah, it was
So take that policy.
16
statement.
pages of a lot of stuff. So we're going to take the policy piece out of it and put it in the policy manual.
And that policy will be called non-discrimination? So we don't
Because
have
it
to...
fits into that category.
call it hate crimes or
Right,
anything else.
Yeah. Because, in this general statement of policy, it says the Foxborough School District prohibits all forms of harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes based on race, color, religion. It lists all the
everything.
protected
All the
areas.
required.
So in the
Well, this is-
non-discrimination, we do not have to name a person, even though we name it elsewhere.
No, there's only one place you have to name a person, and
That's the
that's
sexual
sexual harassment,
harassment, right.
which we're going to
that,
get to.
and that's, I know what that's me.
Oh, that's you, okay.
So this is a case where the Foxborough policy goes far enough.
Okay.
Okay.
But I have a question.
Okay.
Do we need a line in there that says, how do we notify students and employees of this non-discrimination? This doesn't, all of our policies say how people...
Well,
will
each of
be
the
notified.
handbooks have a non-discrimination
Yeah.
statement.
Okay.
And there's also non-discrimination statements in the student section, which is section J.
Okay.
There's a non-discrimination statement in the personnel section, which is be under your hiring provisions. And
Okay.
there's also one in the instruction area, which is students will not be discriminated against taking courses based on any of these areas. So it's equal educational opportunity as well.
I think we should have a line at the very bottom that says, students are notified, students and employees are notified of this policy per the student handbooks and personnel section. Is that in the student handbook you're
Sure.
saying? I think we should say, we should see this as a living document, and if we're this confused and we have, by regulation, all of these various non-discrimination for sexual harassment, for a number of specific policies, I just think we should be consistent.
Okay. Anybody else on this one?
Just one last question.
Do you,
Since
do
you're
you
going to be...
call it student handbooks or is it student parent handbook?
elementary says student,
We say student handbook.
Student
handbook,
handbook.
and that's at the high school.
And it is in the student handbook.
Right. Okay.
I have just one other question. So, Jim, you're going to rewrite this then from that other policy, and then we'll see that?
Yes.
So, can I assume that instead of starting out
Well,
public
so I'm
schools...
not rewriting it, I'm just gonna,
Insert.
I'm just gonna
Okay.
cut and paste it and separate it into...
No problem, but again, for consistency, instead of saying a public school, it'll say Foxborough Public
Correct.
Schools, and
Well-
it'll say Stones instead of...
But you use, in your document, you use Foxborough School District.
Yeah, that's
So,
fine.
that's good.
Which do you prefer?
Well, we should be clear, because if we tell him one way, everywhere else it says Foxborough Public Schools in the policy. So however we want to do it, we should just then...
What does that Foxborough policy say?
This says Foxborough School District, but in other documents, it says,
All
you know,
others.
Foxborough Schools.
And some say Foxborough
Public
Public
schools.
Schools. So just, we should probably, to not
Here's
drive
here's an
you crazy.
opportunity to make them consistent.
You know what,
Right.
why don't we
Yep.
put Foxborough Public Schools, because we've got a charter school, we've got Sabbath, we don't want it to say Foxborough District, because we don't want people to assume
Okay.
that the district takes in everybody else, so Foxborough Public
So
Schools.
we'll make that consistent throughout.
Okay, perfect.
Good.
All right.
Now, even though you have a policy that states non-discrimination, Title IX requires a separate policy on non-discrimination on the basis of sex or gender. You do not have to name the person in your policy.
Okay. Because it might change from year to year.
Right.
Okay.
We just update that cover sheet actually year to year. It has a small synopsis of each of the laws and then the contact person. So it's one page.
ACA.
And Michelle, is that also for the student handbooks?
It's in the student handbooks, and we actually
You
give
can
it out
put
at
on
the
that that
beginning
we're
of
going
each year
to
at our
put
first staff
Foxborough
meetings
Public
to
Schools
staff.
on everything.
So, again, to be consistent on these, and I think we should note that consistently on each one then. So we would say the same. So it's not just student handbooks to employees, it's also
Children to students.
the orientation handout, or how should that be said?
Just-
When you
it's
give
just a
out that
general
packet?
It's part, yeah, it's one sheet, and again, it's a synopsis of each of the laws with the contact person, and it is distributed at our initial staff meetings each year.
Martha, since we're talking about the handbooks, I've had several parents call me, and I've talked to Paul as well. The high school handbook gets printed at the end of June. And so the parents have called to say, shouldn't we have whatever changes we're going to have approved before the handbook's printed? Otherwise, you got to wait a whole year before any of that gets there. So the question that was raised by several parents was, at this meeting, could we look at those sections that would impact the student handbook and consider taking them out of order? I don't know whether that makes sense or not. I thought I would bring it up both for the committee and for Jim's thoughts.
I think it all depends on how soon they get them done. I mean, I'm not going to hold up this document.
Jim, Martha had asked me to check with you like 6 weeks ago on this matter, and we did talk about it. Would you like to recap again what you had told us?
We certainly can. Obviously, we're concentrating on trying to get C and D to you,
Yeah.
which is the next two sections for review. We could certainly, before starting work on E and F, do J,
Okay.
which would put you at reviewing it May 18th.
Okay.
So we could, if you wanted to take J out of order and move it to May 18th, and everything else would be bumped down a meeting.
I don't have a problem with that, if it'll help them.
Your recommendation, when we asked you about 6 weeks ago, was to have them proceed, and do you recall that?
Yeah, the issue is always going to be what, the chicken or the egg, what's going to come first. Because the new policies won't be in effect until you approve the manual, which right now is scheduled for sometime, I think we're talking about late August, early September, at some point, at which point the handbooks will already be published.
Yeah.
So you don't want to establish a policy or approve a policy manual that's now in conflict,
With the
or
handbook.
that puts the handbooks in conflict. So I understand the question. But we've been approaching this as the handbook's probably the most up-to-date document in the district. So we've been trying to match, we've been taking policy language out of the existing handbooks. So if there was changes to be made or changes that are being proposed in the handbook, we could do it in reverse. We could take the policy change, or those policy issues or changes that are being proposed and incorporating into the review. So when the policy does come before the committee, it already reflects the changes that the councils and so forth have made and the administration has made in the handbook. Or you're going to be making comparisons or looking at policy that contains the handbook language from the previous handbook, or the one that's in existence right now, and then we're going to have to incorporate any proposed changes probably before they come before the committee for approval. So,
Because I know Jan has told me that she wants to address some of the disciplinary rules, and there's some things that she wanted to talk to the committee about, and that she wanted to get into those student handbooks this year. So I just want us to try to coordinate and figure out what's the best way to provide administration the support they need for the changes they want to make, get them published at the appropriate time so we're not holding that up, but then not to mess up the process we're doing as well.
Would it be easier to have them, I mean, Larry, this is a good point, because you brought it up a couple of times that we needed to have a discussion on discipline. Is that something that we should use as an agenda item to, at our next meeting, and that way start the conversation so that Jan and the school council will have some input and direction from us where necessary? In other words, we
Right.
really should have that specific conversation.
Jan had talked about, for instance, to me, she had talked about bringing firearms to school, alcohol on the school property, or coming to school under the influence, and she wanted to revisit some of that stuff and present that to the committee. Now, I don't know that she had finalized in her mind what changes she was going to propose, but she mentioned that those were important areas that she wanted to address this year. So I presume her and Jeff have already been working on it, because if they have to go to print at the end of June, they've already probably started that dialogue. So one way or another, I think what Jim was saying, either we take the student handbooks and we look at those and work backwards into the policy, or we do the policy and then work backwards into the student handbooks, whatever makes the most sense. But I just don't know where they stand, because Jan's on vacation, so I don't know where the high school.
do you know when the handbooks were coming to the committee for discussion?
I don't. Do you, Martha?
It's usually early May, the second meeting that we have in May. They bring them because
We
they
have
want
only, we have only one meeting in
The
May.
third Monday of May is
Yeah.
the only meeting in May, so that's maybe when they would come.
It's got to be before the end of the school year per se, so it'll probably be the third meeting, the third Monday in May. Why don't you can you bullet that and ask her if we can get it on the agenda?
I talked to Jeff Theodos, and he said they were working on the handbook.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So we could at
So
least
then
review
it would
that.
make sense to get the handbook and then,
And then we can take whatever changes are made in the handbook,
and
Work
beef
back
up
with
roll
the
them into the policy, so when
Yeah.
we have the policy section in front of us, it will reflect
the
the
handbook.
changes made in the latest.
That would make more sense. I don't think
And it still addresses the parents and the administrators' concerns of making sure that any changes get done before the printing, and they're coordinated with this.
Right.
Otherwise, we're doing double duty
No,
on
you
the
don't want to
policy.
do that.
That's silly.
You don't want to do that.
Now, what letter is that one?
That's section, most of the handbook items are in section J.
Perfect. Then
There are a
let's leave it
few
the way it
items in
is.
section I, dealing with curriculum, promotion, retention, graduation requirements, so
Okay.
forth, so. But even with that, if there are any changes in those areas, we can very easily incorporate those changes into that section of the manual,
Okay.
so that, the
All right,
idea,
leave it the way it
obviously,
is.
is when you're done, you'll have the handbook that's up to date, but your policy manual will also have all the up-to-date information from the handbook.
See, that's why moving forward, it's going to be important for us that when the handbooks come out, we go back to the policy
Right.
and
Every
make
year.
sure, update it, and, okay, all right, go ahead.
Well, one of the charges could also possibly be that when handbook changes are being presented, one of the questions
the
is,
policies.
well, how does this change reflect current district policy?
Okay.
Are we on ACA still?
I think we finished that.
All right, I just wanted to ask a question. It says the school committee, then the committee. Do we want to be consistent and say the Foxborough School Committee each time? Because here it says the committee and the school committee. Do we want to identify it as Foxborough? Or is that going to be intuitive because it's our Foxborough
It is your
policy?
manual.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Bev. Let's customize it Foxborough all the way.
And let's be consistent, because you,
But because right here it says the school committee and then it says the committee. So if we're going to go for
we'll say Foxborough.
Foxborough School Committee.
We don't want to leave any areas of,
I mean, if somebody takes one of this separately
Okay.
and is sharing, so Foxborough School Committee? Consistent throughout, okay.
Okay. We all set with that one?
One last,
What?
Jim, if you would, where the Title IX compliance officer appears, could you make sure that that is capped? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And it's a position we created, so we should use that in caps or be consistent with how we use it.
My publications director would argue with you that unless it's including a proper name right after it, it's
You're not
always
going
a
to.
case.
Then let's just be consistent and then do it one way or the other. Because when I see it done both ways, it makes me a little nutty, if you wouldn't mind.
Yep.
Okay. We'll go with the lower.
Lower unless it's named, okay.
Okay. No, you don't.
I don't
I
care.
believe that information is covered later on tonight,
It is.
when we get to minutes.
As we discussed at the last meeting, the sexual harassment policy, the items that are in the bold underlined are some of the later changes that have occurred in this area of policy. But this is the one policy where you have to physically name the person who is the grievance officer. So,
All right, so every year you should check, make
Unless
sure
it
you have the
changes.
name. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Check and make sure that
Right.
it says that it's current. Okay.
There's one, we've always had one male, one female,
okay.
and it's myself and Jill Heinrich.
I'm going to need both name, address,
Okay.
all the information,
Yeah.
name, address, phone number, if you could send that to me.
Sure.
And we only have to, we don't have to ratify it each year, we only have to ratify a change.
Change.
Okay.
But it needs
The
to be
name
signed,
change.
that's the one that needs to be signed by employees when they start, and doesn't have to be updated every so often, or it's updated every,
Michelle, is
or it's
that?
the computer route.
Oh, the computer usage.
The
Yeah,
computer
did we
usage.
move to computer usage?
So although
No.
employers
No, we
require
don't.
employees to sign it every year, we're not,
We
we're
don't
not,
sorry,
sign
what
it every
year?
year.
the sexual harassment policy.
No.
No.
So public schools are not required to, they're just required upon.
They have to
employment.
post and notify who is the sexual harassment grievance officer for the district.
Okay.
And additionally, they have to put that person's, in this case, two people's name in their policy, their published policy on sexual harassment.
I know, all the,
This is the only one you have to put a name to. Everything else you can put a title or,
Actually, I'll try to email you that page that we put
Okay.
out too.
great,
You probably have seen it, it's in the handbook.
if it's in the handbook, I have.
Jim, what you're saying is what's bold and underlined should be inserted.
Well, that was a change in 1997 to
Okay.
sexual harassment laws, so
So we
a lot
should
of
put
districts
that.
that I've been working with have the older version of this policy, so
All right.
we did this because they want to know what's different,
Okay,
so.
all right.
We want to
And
be
you
current.
notice
So we
we
want
did the
that,
same
we
thing
do
in the
that.
Corey policy.
Yeah.
that-
Right, that's a lot of that, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I just have one question on page 2 of 2, the
Yep.
last item, number 4. I read that numerous times. Can you explain to me what that item means?
Grievance officer upon request will provide the charging party with government agencies that handle sexual harassment matters.
Should we read it with the names of government agencies?
What they do is
Sounds
tell
like
you
the-
who handles this
Yeah,
outside of
the grievance
district.
officer will refer that
Yeah.
person.
Right.
Like
to
the MCAD.
appropriate-
So the MCAD,
Yeah.
so our grievance officer is required to give that information?
Upon request, yeah.
Upon request.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's what that means then. And that's required by law.
So if the grievance officer found that there was in fact a case of sexual harassment and the person wanted to pursue it, the grievance officer would then notify, here's how you should pursue it, if you wanted to take legal action.
Should we list those agencies on here?
No, because they change.
They change?
Even though MCAD stays the same,
Yeah.
its location has moved 3 times
Okay.
in the last 5 years. It wasn't a solid
The
stop.
key is just making sure that the
Right.
sexual harassment officer knows and has updated information.
Is that machine still on?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Lorraine has a question.
Lorraine? Sure.
On page 2, section D, attempt to resolve the matter informally through reconciliation is a choice that's given. I just was questioning, given the serious nature of this, should there always be a requirement that it would be discussed with the superintendent or somehow documented? When I read that, I thought you could find yourself in a situation where someone's interpretation may be slightly different than someone else's, and two heads are always better than one in the serious.
But that's why it says may. To give us a may. So if they don't feel they can handle it through reconciliation, they can go to the next level
Are you talking about notification, that you would want the superintendent to have that information, that there was even an incident,
Incident, yeah.
whether it was reconciled or not?
I always do.
up.
You always do anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I always have, so.
But put language in it that requires the person to do that.
Just to make it as clear as possible.
Michelle,
It just seemed open for discussion.
Yeah, well, it is, by the wording. I mean, it seems like the superintendent should be aware of any incidents that have come across.
Unless the person asks not to. I mean, there have been some times where someone's sharing something, but they
Don't want it to go any
don't want it
further.
to go any further. They're just,
That's true.
so that's at your discretion in
Well,
discussing
that's-
with them?
There's a confidentiality piece that, I try to talk to them about. This is something that, should be shared, but that has been a case.
I think that's why if you have the may in there, then it leaves it open. Otherwise, if someone's concerned about something, they come and they know you're going to report it, they might not come to you. So I think you have to leave it open-ended.
Yeah, we don't want to discourage
Yeah.
anyone from,
Can you add to the discretion of the complainant?
Yeah, it is.
That's
No,
what-
if you insert the wording at the discretion of the person raising the complaint, so the person complaining has the final word on whether it's going to go up to the next level or not. But this being spelled out, there's no more.
Michelle, if you found a situation where there was in fact sexual harassment, it's not a discretionary item, you would report that,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
Your obligation.
Right.
Okay. So we're
Yeah.
covered.
In this case,
I mean,
yeah, it was
it's
not.
implied, it may not be written, but I think, and I would hope our attorney will also look at the view on handicap and disability and sexual harassment, because I think, I love what Mask has done, but I think we need to also review that with our school attorney because of the seriousness. And I think they would say to you that we're covered with this language, okay?
If I remember, I think once it's brought to your attention, you're required
We're required,
to
yes.
act on it. You cannot not do something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, I have so many different cases in mind. I mean, each one, there's a different nuance to each, So I should say so many, I just, sometimes what's reported.
I was going to ask you, how many cases in a year for you and Joe?
Honestly, I can't speak for Joe. I mean,
Okay.
just myself, over the last 2 years, maybe 3.
The reason I was asking is that if you had a number that was surprising, it might mean we need to do more training. And so it would be interesting maybe to talk to the superintendent just to understand how many cases and what kind of training we do on an annual basis or regular basis, whatever it might be, because the best defense is not to have that kind of an environment. And in the event that there was a problem, we'd want to have a solid governance structure that says we provide regular training, and you always will have a rogue person, but if you haven't provided training or done other things that you should have been doing, then that adds to our culpability if there is a particular problem. So we ought to just maybe make a note to have Jan update us as to how often that training is done, who does the training, just a little bit about the training, because this is a pretty important subject.
I think when you look at number 3, though, I think that covers, Jim, probably what we're what the concerns in the audience are. At this stage of the proceedings, the parties may present witnesses and other evidence. It may also be represented. The parties, to the extent permissible by, shall be informed of the disposition of the
was new.
complaint. So,
Because it used to be that only the person of which the complaint was filed against was notified. The complainant wasn't always necessarily notified. So that was a change in 97 where both parties involved had to be notified of disposition.
So when is the school committee officially notified? Only when there's litigation?
when there's a formal complaint.
Well,
Larry's
actually,
right.
it would
Perhaps
be-
what we should do is to make it clear when the school committee is in fact, because I think that's what our attorney would do, looking at
Right.
this policy.
It's
So-
just from a governance standpoint, we
Yes.
have a responsibility to make sure that the environment that our employees work in is free from this. So we have a responsibility to make sure there's adequate training, there's adequate investigation, and in fact, that employees have been treated properly in the event they have a complaint.
And we raise a good point. If it's not clear to us in this meeting, then perhaps what we want to do is put that point in so it is clear to us. At what point are we notified? Because we are not to be involved at all in a
You wouldn't
personnel
be.
matter.
Well, you wouldn't be
So-
because it's a personnel matter,
Right.
so you're not going to be
Unless it
involved
was a
with it.
If the
student
complaint
issue.
is, but at what point, so you're saying at the end of a complaint has been made, it's been investigated, and it's moving forward. At what point, because ultimately the school committee is responsible for this policy, and if there's litigation, it comes back to us. So at what point is the school committee notified?
Because it's a personnel
Because,
matter,
yeah.
you're not involved with it, because we don't handle personnel matters.
Okay, so we wait
It
till we
would
get
be,
the notice from our school attorney? And that's what we're saying?
That's the
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
But the law may say that we can't have the detail,
Right.
but the law doesn't say that we couldn't require the superintendent to report to us, not the details, but for instance, if the superintendent reported to me that every month we had a case, that would give me rise to say we have a problem in our environment that we need to
No.
address. If there's a case a month and we don't hear about it, and at the end of a year there's all of a sudden 3 lawsuits filed, it's a little late for us to change the environment that we've been in. So I would like some notification, not of the situation or the people or anything, but how often this is happening, and whether or not it's been resolved. You know, if you told me that, for instance, we had 5 a year, 1 in each school, that's very different than if we had 5 all
In
in
the
one
same
school. So I'm just looking for some data that would help me understand the environment that our employees are subjected to make sure that it's appropriate. Because one of the things that you would want to measure the superintendent on is that work environment. Have they created a friendly work environment that is conducive to employees doing their best and free from discrimination, harassment, et cetera?
I think what's happened in the past is if there was a personnel issue, okay, then it would be dealt with, obviously, in executive session. You never really made totally aware, I don't think,
Right? I'm not asking
of
that.
what's going on, but you are made aware that there are some issues and that it has been resolved, attorneys have been involved, whatever. So you are informed at some point, but
I think it brings up the point that you were saying before, Larry and Kate. We are responsible for developing policy. And so you might say, well, the implementation of it is the superintendent and the administrators, yet we are still, if we are not providing a policy that is sufficient, which might be the case if something comes up like you're suggesting, 5 a month or whatever, then we as a school committee have a responsibility to know that and to then alter what the policy is,
Yeah.
to put into place more. So I think there's that kind of gray line. No, we don't need to know maybe specifics, but
Can I just ask a question? How come this policy that we talked about last, why does that not include, I mean, it discusses harassment, isn't sexual harassment a form of harassment?
It's a form, but not, it doesn't go far enough.
Okay.
That's the challenge, is that the legal requirements of minimum components of this particular policy, just the plain harassment policy didn't go far enough.
Okay.
But in response to, I mean, if you look at the second paragraph for page 1, the bolded says, because the school committee takes allegations of sexual harassment seriously, we will respond promptly to complaints of sexual harassment. And where it is determined that such inappropriate conduct is occurred, we will act promptly and eliminate the conduct and impose such corrective action as necessary, blah, blah, blah. How do you do that if you don't know about it?
Right, that's my point.
So does that cover us from a legal
No,
standpoint?
I think back to the original point is maybe we need to add a statement that, that the superintendent will notify the school committee of sexual harassment incidences.
So we could insert it there?
Yeah, right at the, it's maybe number 5.
Number 5.
Okay, that's where I had it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking under that paragraph, okay.
And we could go back and do that in AC as well.
Yeah.
Because if there was any discrimination, we'd want to know about
Anytime.
that.
So all, you're saying,
Right.
you're right, we have to be
And-
consistent, all of our policies.
I just want a mechanism where we're made aware,
what's
so that
going
if
on.
we think additional training has to be done, or whatever it might be, that we can provide the support that the superintendent needs to address the issues.
All right, so we want it on ACA, non-discrimination on the basis of sex, and then on the sexual harassment, that we're made aware that there's a problem.
Right.
Okay. But we do understand we won't
No,
probably know the specifics, but
We
we'll
don't
just
need to
know
know
that
But
there's a
know
problem.
that there's
Okay.
a problem.
We don't need to
exists.
know
All
the
right.
specifics.
What's the language going to be? The superintendent will notify the Foxborough School Committee
Yeah.
of any incidents? Do we want to put in a timely fashion? I mean, we don't want to hear about this at the end of the school year.
Right.
We want to hear about it
Yeah.
when it's happening.
Okay.
Timely manner.
Can we, no?
What's timely?
Yeah.
I would say the complaints upon completion of the investigation.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's reasonable.
And one thing as a committee, Katie and I were brand new. I guess we're still brand new for another week or two.
Then you'll become used.
Then we become used.
You're not newbies after that.
But I was surprised and disappointed when several months after being elected and sitting on here, I get a call from our attorney saying, I have to go to conference day after tomorrow and settle a discrimination suit against the town of Foxborough. And I couldn't get a hold of Martha, so I want you to know. And I went, well, wait a minute. We've just had a committee discussion that said we want all the committee to know all the things at the same time. So don't go thinking you're going to settle anything until you come and talk to the school committee. And if you remember, that had been going on for a long time. And as new members, no one briefed us to say, oh, by the way, here's kind of the pending litigation. And so when all of a sudden we're in a meeting, we're being told that here's the situation and here's what the proposed settlement is, et cetera, we paid a lot of money for not having the right environment. And it just seems like, because the board does change over time, that we have to find a way somehow to update new members on potential litigation or things like that. And I know maybe the policy can't address it, but I'd like us to think about it, because I don't know how Katie felt, but I was just, I think it was in September or October, so I'd been on the board 5 or 6 months. This thing had been going for 2 years,
Yeah.
and I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
That's
no, I
a
felt the
great
same
idea,
way.
because, see, we were
Yeah.
briefed, and
Right.
it had gone on for so long that
Right.
we had
It was
forgotten
kind of
about it.
on the back burner. You're
But,
right.
we're going to talk
Yeah.
about the new orientation, so I think that's a great idea. Why don't we?
To add a line there about
Any pending
pretending.
litigation, and I'm sure as we go through this, there are going to be some other things that maybe you can use your experience, what other
That's
surprises?
a good point. I'd forgotten about that, but I
Because
I
you
agree
said
with what
there
you
were
said, Ron.
surprises on the budget, and yet we
Right.
knew curriculum was ongoing. So maybe, we're going to find other things that you want to put into
Right.
that on the new school
Right.
school committee member orientation.
Would you put it in the policy, or would you develop a secondary document of procedures on how some of these policies
You know what,
would be
wait
implemented?
until we get to the section on, there is a policy in here about new people,
Right.
and there's this, and that we're supposed to have, like I was yours.
Right.
I think Beverly was Katie's. But there probably should be something in there about the superintendent updating about any possible litigation, whatever, so we can insert that in that new person's part.
Well, I mean, shame on me for not asking the question. It's just as much my fault as anyone
But
else's.
Larry, you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know, but you know
But I could
what?
have asked the question, is there any? And I didn't. So it's-
Right.
that's what I mean by it's
But
as
you know
much my
what?
fault.
I forgot about it too,
Yeah.
because it, it's always on the back burner
Yeah.
on this.
Mr. Hardy said, up until completion of the investigation, how through policy and...
Upon.
Thank you for your corrections. How do you by policy make sure that those investigations don't just go on and on and on?
You don't.
And it never comes
can't.
up?
You
The
can't,
law doesn't allow it.
no.
The complaints have to be handled in a specific
In so many
time frame.
days.
So they have
So
prescribed
whoever the,
deadlines?
whoever the grievance officer is, if they name that person, they should be aware.
They have
There's
a
whole
manual to
handbook
go by.
that MCAD has put out, I don't know if you have it, but on handling sexual harassment complaints, or any of these discrimination complaints. And there are certain timeframes that certain things have to happen within. It used to say X number of days, but schools ran into problem complying with the days piece. If a complaint came in on the last day of school, like a student filed a complaint against another student, and everybody scattered 2 days later, schools had a hard time finding that. So now it's been reworded to allow for incidences like that. But
But can I just make a correction, because I don't handle student on student. The building principal of each building does that. My role is
Employees.
Right.
I was just using that as an
Oh, okay. I
example.
just wanna make
Because
sure
it's
that- all right.
the whole thing about because we're putting this
Yeah.
language in all the non-discrimination language. So there are specific guidelines that it can't just go on and on and on and on.
You just can't take the complaint and then hope it goes away. That's not the way it works.
I just want to mention, compliance in our organization, we would report quarterly. So if there was a sexual harassment case, it would be reported as ongoing,
Yeah.
as opposed to resolved category. So that way, quarterly, everybody is updated on that. But also, our policy is every year we send out a sexual harassment policy. Every employee has documentation of our refresher, reorientation to them. And it's any active employee, so that includes per diem. So I guess in the school, we would include substitute roster members, things like that.
Okay.
So that's a suggestion.
All right, does anybody else have any other problem with the ACAB? I'm sorry.
No, they're fine. ACE, non-discrimination on the basis of handicap. Again, it's a requirement that you have a separate policy statement because of the Individual with Disabilities Education. In fact, I just noticed that the legal references on page 2 is missing the IDEA item, so we have to add that to the list as well.
Over here, under
Under
cross-references?
No, under legal
Under
references.
legal references, what are you going to put in, Jim?
The IDEA, Individual with Disabilities Education Act. It's an update, it's a reauthorization and update of the 1975 legislation.
Okay.
But it didn't change any of the things on the 2
Okay.
pages. And again, you don't have to publish who the compliance officer is for the year.
But it
You
would
just have to
change.
add one, it's probably on
Okay.
that.
I have a question. What confused me is the word handicap. Most of, in industry, they no longer use that word. They use disability. And is there a reason that we want to stick with the old term?
Nope. Don't change it, change it.
I would like to
Well, it says,
have it
I know,
read.
American with Disabilities Act.
I know.
Why don't we
I think
have-
we need to come into this, this decade and use the term disability.
All right, so get rid of the word handicap and put
Right.
this.
Done.
Mike, I just had a question about, and I guess maybe Paul can answer this, if this is adopted, I know that there are things in the district improvement plan, for example, something with the doors, the door openers, right? But would this make it effective immediately, so that there'd be a financial piece that would go along with it? Stuff
No,
like
because
that?
we don't have to convert unless we're doing a major renovation that exceeds so much money.
Okay.
So where we're compliant, we're compliant.
Okay.
If we do anything above and beyond, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, when we get into a certain money category, then we would have to go around and change everything.
You have to be compliant at a date that the regulation or the law was in effect.
Yeah.
So as it changes, you don't have to go back and retroactively fix things unless you go over the construction threshold.
Okay.
In the meantime, you just simply have to make reasonable accommodations to.
And that's my next question. Shouldn't that word, that legal word, it's reasonable accommodation under the financial aspects? And if we could, it says limits of required modification,
Where are you?
the second to the last paragraph.
First page.
Page
Yeah,
one.
page
Page
one.
1 of 2.
Yeah. To me, that really should be up under reasonable accommodation, reasonable modification, because the first question is, we don't meet the test unless we talk about cost, and you have met that when you talk about, well, it won't be the district, it'll be Foxborough Public Schools. But you can't have one without the other, and you always have those two clauses together. And it's split up here, and I found that very distracting.
Redo them. Would you prefer limits of required modification to follow reasonable modification?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right,
So we'll just change the place.
let's move it up.
And the legal threshold is reasonable accommodation. Shouldn't that wording be in under limits of required modification?
We use the definitions from the act, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's,
But isn't the legal precedent reasonable accommodation without undue financial
It's
burden?
reasonable modification.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying that
The
legally,
commonly accepted verbiage is reasonable accommodation. But the
okay.
language here is.
Where did I miss it? Because that's what reasonable,
Well,
I didn't see that appear, and that's the
Right.
standard. That's, so,
No,
and that's
the
how.
standard is actually defined as reasonable modification,
Okay.
but we.
We're gonna move
but
this
one up
the-
to
the
here.
general,
but
the
you don't have to be
general,
that specific.
I guess the slang version of it
Who's
is.
going to do it?
Because that's set by legal precedent, so that's what industry bases it on. I know education may be different, but if
Well,
that's.
it's public, the public building aspect of it.
Okay, so it's fine as required modification. The only other question I had, the last, where it says notice, could you explain to me what that means and why that's in there?
On the bottom of this
Yeah,
first page.
I'm not quite sure. I know we have an opportunity to do that. I find it very confusing, that paragraph.
And this was our original policy, right, because it says Foxborough at the bottom?
Yeah.
No?
Now, this is mask, so I just
They
want
all
to
say
know.
Foxborough.
Oh, okay.
We've been-
That's what the final document looks like.
See where it says source? That's where, on the next page.
So I guess because we've been so specific with how we notify students and employees, I'm sure it's important to have notice, but the way this is written is very unclear and confusing to me.
And we took the language right out of the publication on Title II, so we wanted to make it as accurate, so we just took the language from there.
And again,
So
I
it's sourced
believe
back to
that's
there.
on our synopsis page, that goes into handbooks, and I wish I brought that.
I don't have a problem with it, Kate.
Well, if it's directly listed,
Yeah.
and it's already reflected in the handbooks, I don't think we should change it.
No, except we've been very precise to stay on sexual harassment and other non-discrimination. We will notify students and employees through the student handbook and at the beginning of each school year. So why wouldn't we follow the same approach for consistency?
I don't understand what you're
I
trying
don't
to do.
The last item, we have a responsibility to how we notify our students and our employees. In the sexual harassment policy we just reviewed, and also the non-discrimination policy, we were very clear in how students and employees will be informed. This makes some reference, it says we're going to do it, but in other words, for however we do, these are all our legal compliance. We want to say we're not discriminating on the basis of race, sex, religion, all of those things. When we are required by law to have a specific policy, don't we want to be consistent with the language? That's all I'm saying.
And actually, it seems like it says it in that next paragraph, what you want.
Under compliance coordinator?
Yeah, because isn't that what?
No. I'm assuming, Jim, if you, we have notice, is because
Yep.
of how we're going to notify students and employees, students, parents, and
Yep.
employees. If we spelled it out in our other discrimination policies, why wouldn't we spell that out clearly here? That's all, that's my.
You're just asking for the consistency of
Right,
language between
language.
the last couple in here.
Yes.
That's,
But I don't remember seeing this in your handbook, so we've used the handbook as the vehicle for notice.
Yeah.
And that'd be, if you want to put it here, then we need to make sure that piece is contained within the handbook.
I don't have a problem with the way it is. Just says the district shall make available to applicants, to whatever, information regarding the provisions of Title II.
it's that last sentence, I think, that Kate's talking about. The information shall be made available in such a manner, which is vague, and she just wants it consistent with all the others. Is that correct, Kate?
Yes, thank you, Larry.
So whatever language we used in the others for that last sentence, she would like to be consistent here.
Which is the handbook.
Right, which would mean we have to go back and make sure that this is covered in the handbook as well, which we should.
But the synopsis with the coordinator's name, that's in there.
It's already in there.
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
assistant superintendent instead of designated.
So we'll just say
I'm
make
pretty
available
sure.
through.
Student handbook?
Such a manner as.
Well, maybe you can just make a
But
note.
applicants wouldn't have access to your handbook.
So how do
I'm
we
a
make
little
applicants
confused. Did we put
available?
handbook in the sexual harassment, the actual words, the student handbook, in the previous one? We didn't actually put that in there, did we?
No, not in sexual harassment.
So which is the one that Kate, that
We
you felt we
did
could have?
non-discrimination, the non-discrimination statement on the
Okay,
basis
well,
of gender and the general non-discrimination, the AC policy.
Right, I asked that question, Katie, but it's not in there because Jim told us we don't have to, we post that policy. So as it's written, I guess that's what gets posted. That's how people are notified.
What I might just suggest is that, I think Jim's heard what the committee would like to do. Instead of trying to make him write it right here on the spot, he's got the notes, let him try to figure it out in the peace and quiet of his office, and we'll catch it when we go through the next review.
It's
No
a
problem.
quick assumption that my office is
On the road.
And Michelle, you're saying, though, the designee that we have in student handbooks is in fact done by the assistant superintendent.
Okay.
Last item, to just catch those words, handicap appears 3 times
Yeah, we'll
under
just- we'll
first
just
do
one,
it. Just
disability.
finish.
Thank you.
Where was that on that first page?
No, second page.
Second, okay.
It's got it 3 times.
Yeah.
On AD,
We'll tie this back to the
Yeah,
mission,
we have-
strategic
sent to me.
plan, mission statement, all that stuff.
Wendy?
Yes,
Wendy.
Wendy,
Yeah.
yes.
Sent me the mission statement and the vision statement for the district. So
Okay.
we'll just replace
Good.
that.
And that would be for the ADA too, right?
The ADA is your file. Well, there is a file, ADA, philosophy and goals. This is in the 1100 series of the previous manual. And my question here would be, was this updated, because there was talk of a strategic plan. So did
Right.
this predates, this 1988.
Right,
So this predates the strategic plan.
right.
So would we want to put something in the ADA file relating back to what's the content of the strategic plan?
I think we do.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
And we have a policy that requires that to be updated on a regular basis, so we would just keep updating
Which
this
is the
section.
next one,
Right,
Yeah,
for the long-range strategic plan.
right. And that,
All right, so we'll take the goals listed in the strategic plan and
Right.
put that on the ADA.
correct.
Is that on the web, on your website?
The strategic plan is,
Okay.
not the district.
The district improvement
No.
plan hasn't been submitted to the committee yet. It's only with the subcommittee.
Okay. We'll do that.
So that got rid of it too, right?
Now, the long-range strategic planning is the policy that talks about updating it and has some timelines.
Right.
It was last amended in 1987, but has anything really changed
Well,
from what you're currently practicing with your strategic planning that you have now?
well, with the exception of the current one, there hasn't been one for 10 years.
Okay.
So, it just seemed, when I look at A, B, and C, it would seem like A says each year by December 1st, the superintendent will update and revise the 5-year plan. I would think unless an extension is granted by the school committee. If you had a superintendent that started in November, he or she may not be able to do it. So there ought to be at least a little thing there,
So put unless,
unless an extension is voted by the school committee or something like that.
Can I ask you a question, Larry? Is December 1st the right date?
Well, that's what I was going to ask in the next point.
I know Jan, in talking about the district update, had suggested that, but I guess my
Bless you.
question, shouldn't we get input from Chris Martis on this? And wouldn't we want, we've got strategic plans, we have district plans, we have school council plans.
The timeline might not be
I
what
think
it should
we
be.
want to maybe discuss and know, do we want it for the school year, or do we want all those to come in mid-year?
I raised that on B and C. I don't know that January and February is the right time. It's middle of the budget season,
Yeah,
et cetera.
I agree.
And
I just think it would be better.
Let's talk about that just for a second. You have all those different plans. Which is the master? What is all the other plans?
they should drive off the
Drive off the
strategic plan.
strategic plan,
Yeah.
right?
So that should be done
So
first.
So
so it
that
should be
will-
done before the budget.
And your budget development should actually be done from the improvement plans.
Right.
Right.
So
So
what's
you
the
work backwards.
sequence?
I think it should be September. I'd like to have it in place for the school year, and we measure, the superintendent, we measure our staff on the school year. So if the strategic plan is the horse before the cart, then everything falls after that. So we should be saying that we want that at September, the beginning of the school year.
Right, because they
So
work
then
on it
would
over
you
the
want school
summer.
improvement plans in September also?
No, because I think the strategic plan, we want for September, or, by the end of August, for the beginning of September. The school improvement plans will work off of that, and now the school improvement plans are going to be every 2 years, not every year. So, again, I'd like to capture the school year,
And wait a
because
minute,
if
wait a
not,
minute,
if
wait
we
a
do
minute.
mid-year, we will always be
The
confused.
school improvements come in so that we can work off of it for budget, I would think.
So that's fall,
So that's fall.
which
Well,
is
we
why.
vote them every June, okay? So actually, that would carry to the beginning, and any updates to the strategic plan or
Should
our
come after
goals or
the,
whatnot.
after the district.
If those were there in September, when we would be updating in September, then that is what will lead this organization through the budgeting process and through everything else. And then the school councils are still ongoing their work, and they're still going to report to us at the end of the school year.
The only
What-
thing is, I wouldn't want to see them at the beginning of September because we're just coming back to school and there's too much going on. I would think the end of September.
That's
You're
fine.
going to change it
For the
for the
strategic?
strategic. Because then you've had the summer for any problems, whatever, either September or the first meeting in October, because it's not,
And then after the strategic plan, the next thing
Then
the
we-
superintendent provides us is the district improvement plan, which sets the tone for all the district.
Yeah.
And then the school improvement plans come in off of the district improvement plan.
yeah,
And then the budget and the funding should be there to support those.
yeah.
Right,
So-
so if the timeline, I'm just asking that, are we moving everything to the fall then? Is that
It
what?
seems like we're talking about moving it to the fall.
But it's probably something that we should discuss with the new superintendent.
Right.
And see how,
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
May and June,
But-
it's so busy and our school
Yeah.
councils
Right.
work on it. It'd be nice to have the summer,
Yeah.
to then really put it together and.
yeah, it would make more sense, Michelle. Jim, what do you think?
Well, a December 1st, what you're talking about making that September?
No.
October first.
October,
October, yeah.
yeah.
But realistically, when you say school councils are going to be working during the summer,
They don't, though.
they don't. So that's not,
And
I
Membership
didn't
may
say that
change
they
after
could
June.
work on,
wouldn't it?
yeah, I was thinking more that their work is done in June, but it gives us as building principals
Okay.
Yeah,
time
to put it together.
so they'd still be presented to the school committee in June, like they
Yes.
normally do.
Yes.
I wasn't thinking that, but that's okay.
Yeah,
Why would you
yeah,
want
yeah.
them to present before the principals have had a chance to really think it through? And, I mean, why wouldn't you, if you were going to do the strategic plan the 1st of October, why wouldn't you have the district, so let's say the district improvement plan, 1st of November, and the school improvement plan is the 1st of December, we start our budgeting usually after the 1st of December. So that would give you 1 month in between each of those. And so the school improvement plans would have the benefit of the district improvement plan, which would have the benefit of the strategic plan.
Go ahead, Paul.
No, Paul?
Well, I was thinking, didn't we deliver the budget to the committee in the very beginning of December this year?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So administration's budget, I think, was December 1st this year.
Okay.
I think, why don't we talk to Chris and see what he wants for a timeline, what he thinks,
So do you
what
want
he's done. in the
to
past.
hold this one off?
Yeah, hold
for a
this
little
one
bit?
off.
Yeah, to Chris, and
Let me look at
also,
this time to think.
you know, we're trying to fit a round peg in a square hole here. If we looked at what we have on the strategic plan, it would probably make this clear.
Can you give that to him on?
I'd like to just ask a question. We decided to skip over AD, so we're not going to have educational philosophy?
No, we replaced educational philosophy with the mission and
And
vision
value
statement
Yeah.
that the
Okay.
district already has.
And we will mention a strategic plan, right?
That'll be
That'll be-
in
Yeah.
ADAA.
ADAA.
Okay.
The mission of the Foxborough Public Schools, guided by its core values, is to engage students in a rich, diversified education, thereby empowering them to challenge themselves as they become productive, responsible citizens.
And again, for me, that comes from the strategic plan, so would you please put in that phrase, just so we're not confused?
Well, that will be file AD.
Excellent. That's what I was confused over.
Okay.
Make sure that Chris gets some.
ADBA, alcoholic beverages on school premises.
I had 2 questions on that. We have in town, we've started in the last few years an all-night party for the seniors. And I've never attended, but anecdotal information says that some of the students that are admitted there, some of the graduates, have been drinking before they get there. And some of the folks that have organized it said, well, it's not a school function, it's not a school thing, so what difference does it make? And since we, as a school committee, have been talking about the serious issue we have in town with drugs and alcohol, I think we ought to talk about the use of school premises like that in letting young adults come in at 18 years old when they've graduated and may have been drinking, come into the party. And then some of the response are, well, they're here, they can't leave. So at least they're safe because they've been here and maybe they've been drinking, but they're safe. You know, I think we have to talk seriously as a committee how serious we are about standing behind the anti-drug and alcohol program. And that may mean talking about the graduation party. And if you've been there, maybe you can provide more information. I only have anecdotal information from parents that have called me.
But I think the only thing you can do about this policy, you know, you're talking about something that might have happened or can happen.
Right.
Then we have to firm up this policy that says alcoholic beverages or prior consumption.
That's
Yeah.
Because that's the only
Yes,
thing that's going to
that's
cover
right.
you. This
Right.
means, you know, if they show up and they've already been drinking, there's nothing
Right.
theoretically, you catch them, you hold them accountable for it.
Right.
But if you're going to have a policy that's going to have some meat to it, then it should be alcoholic beverages or prior consumption.
because my concern,
not
frankly,
be
is,
allowed.
let's say
That would be
somebody,
under the student code of conduct.
Yeah.
And
are
not
they a
here.
student any
No,
longer
but
now they
that's-
graduated?
But according, that party is not a school-sponsored event.
Right.
That's something that I just
Right.
discovered.
But
It is
they
a-
use our building,
That's
and
right.
we'd be sued if something
That's
happened
right.
in there.
Principals, administrators are not there chaperoning.
No, I know,
It is
but so that's why the only
police
way to do anything about that
Parents.
is, you're talking alcoholic beverages on school premises. They're not bringing alcohol onto the premises, they're bringing it inside them, okay? So the only thing you can do about it is to, I mean, what about a parent who might drink before they get here? I mean, it's the same concept per
Right.
se, but you have to, because it's an underage drinker, the only way you're going to do anything about this policy is to
to put more language
Put
in there
more
to
language in.
specify. And I do think that is a discussion that we need to have
At a
as
regular
committee,
session, not now, per
And also,
se.
we need to bring in the high school administrators, we have to bring the
So in reality,
superintendent.
that's more of a community use of school building.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
That's correct.
Which is covered by the selectmen. And I agree with Larry and Katie. Well,
What do you mean covered by the selectmen?
we're not allowed on town property to have any alcohol unless
Right.
it's by permission with the from the Board of Selectmen. So my question is, I think we need to have this
Well, by
discussion on
both.
alcohol, and I do think that this is something that we are very committed to doing, and we need to continue to do, and then just make some decisions on the future of the all-night senior party. But right here, my question is, why do we need or want this policy? Until we're ready to craft the policy that we really want on alcohol,
Well-
which is something different.
Because
This is
Massachusetts
just-
general law is also part
Okay,
of it.
if that's the question,
This,
then,
this section, if you remember, is the basic foundations, or the foundations and basic commitments section.
Yeah.
So these are those policies that apply to the whole program.
so the DOE says, okay.
It's not DOE.
No,
It's-
Well,
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts general law and the DOE will look for this in
In
the.
most cases, most districts don't have this, but this was already in your manual, and you did cite
Massachusetts general law.
the piece that you could allow. Many school committees don't even acknowledge that that section of law exists.
Well, that's,
So even upon request, we're not going to allow, whether the selectmen give you a license or not, we're not going to allow it.
okay.
So-
And that is the conversation that I think we want to have, okay? Because I think if we choose to have this, we're going to want to write it very differently. So I would maybe suggest that we hold then until we write the policy, until we make that determination.
Although,
I don't think we can write this today.
the first paragraph, Kate,
Yeah, but you
is
know what,
alcoholic
if this,
beverages.
wait a minute, if this policy's already here, you can't just arbitrarily take it out, Kate, unless we vote it out. So if this policy's already here, it's gotta be here,
So what do
until
we-
we take it out.
Even though it was written
Doesn't matter.
19 years ago. it
Doesn't
still
matter,
started.
until you vote it out.
Right.
Or you vote to amend it, it exists.
Right, I agree.
There's nothing you can,
I
So
think
should
it's
we
the
be
foundation,
crafting-
though. I think this policy is the foundation for also.
for expanding it.
And also for what we believe in terms of the
Yeah.
handbooks, the high school handbooks. We're not allowing alcohol on school premises or in buildings. So if a student decides to do that,
And I
this is a
understand what you're
policy
saying.
that supports
I'm
it.
just not sure this is where it goes.
Yeah.
Oh, you think it may not even go
If you're
in
talking
this?
about students at school-sponsored activities,
It's in the student.
coming to school under the influence, that's a code of conduct issue.
Yeah.
So that's in the student section of the manual. If you're talking about community use, an after-party or whatever the sponsored, somebody does a building use form or whatever, that's where that goes, under the community use of school facilities. This particular statement just simply says that they're not, alcoholic beverages are not allowed
Yeah.
on school property or in school buildings. And
Unless we authorize
however, there's an out here in that a group could request, and I have seen it in some cases, an art festival, kind of they had wine and cheese thing.
Yeah.
But they had to go through the process, they had to get a one-day liquor license from the Board of Selectmen and so forth, but it was a fundraiser.
So are you saying most schools then don't even have this? Like
That,
even,
because, well, first of all, it's state law, you can't bring alcohol
Yeah.
onto school property.
Okay.
It's, whether
So
you
you
have
need
the
it.
statement,
You don't
whether you
really
have
need
this
it,
statement
yeah.
in your book or not, you can't do it.
Okay.
And I was just using it as a platform to say, we need to have a more robust discussion around drug and alcohol use and abuse by our students, our employees, et cetera. You don't want employees to consume it before work, and you don't want the students to consume it before work. I wasn't saying it should go here, I'm saying I wanted to put on the table, and because we have a graduation or post-graduation party coming up, if this committee were to take a different stand, it would have to do it fairly quickly in order to be fair to the people that are organizing the all-night graduation
Well,
party.
then, Paul, ask her to put it on the next agenda, because it's gonna have to, okay?
So if the statement was that, no alcohol, can't bring alcohol, can't possess alcohol on school grounds, nor
Or no
cannot
prior
be under the
consumption.
influence, are you prepared to administer a breathalyzer to determine that? If you, you can't just arbitrarily say, you've been drinking beforehand, you can't come in, you have, if somebody comes, all right, so, I mean, I'm just going through the thought process. If
understand.
you wanted to do that.
We have
there are a couple
statistics that
steps.
show 1 out of every 4 kids in this town drink or take drugs on the weekend. And the parents that have called me have said that those high school graduates that go to that party, more than 1 out of 4 are coming to the party after already drinking.
Right.
And I'm saying as a school committee, if we're going to take that totally seriously, then maybe we should not allow them to use the high school. And maybe if the parents want to do it, they have to rent a facility someplace else. But we're serious in the school district that we're not going to create an environment that attracts that kind of element. It's not fair to those that don't, and it may not be fair to those that do.
All right, but it's
Yeah,
probably
and I'm not-
something we should put on the.
I'm not disagreeing with you
Right,
at all.
I know you're not.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that if you're going to take that step,
You have to go all the way.
then you have to,
Right.
you might want, again, I can get them for you.
Yeah.
You may want to get some breathalyzer policies to look at
Yeah.
about, and who's going to be administering the breathalyzer, like that whole thing.
Well, be
How
the
do you-
police, because
how do you
there's police
govern it?
out
You
there.
just- you
That's
could-
correct.
Just
I agree.
because you say in policy, you can't drink and then go to the after graduation party, okay?
My point, folks, is this. I've been on the committee almost a year now. The graduation parties never come up to this committee for discussion. We've not talked to the police chief about it, nothing. And what I hear is, it's nothing to do with the schools. It's a community event, but we're using your building. Well, if you're going to use our building, then I think we have liability within that building. And number two, if the committee is going to be serious about anti-drugs and alcohol, I think we have to discuss the use of that building for the all-night party.
Then we'll put
I'm
it
not
on the
trying to
next
douse the all-night party, but I'm saying that it's something that has not come up before this committee in the 11 months I've been here, and they're planning the one for another month from
And
now.
I agree, Larry, I'm glad you brought this up, because I have spoken to a lot of people who have been at that all-night party. I did it one year, but I did it early in the night, so I didn't really see. But I heard a lot of things from parents, and again, it's the parents of the students who reside in this town. So, they've seen it, and they see, students coming in intoxicated. So I think that it is something, we absolutely have to have a discussion about it, but if we want to stick
But
to the
not
policy,
here,
yeah, because
with-
we need
because
input
let's not
from-
get off of this,
yeah,
because
But I agree with you,
it's-
Well, you're going to
Just
put it on the
next-
agenda.
just put it on
It's
the
on the
next
agenda, and I think that's
That's all I
very
wanted
good
to
to
do.
have
But I
that
think
just
that
wanted to
discussion.
going
get-
through these policies, this is the place for us to say, we need it for your
Right.
discussion of
Right.
something else.
So
But
then
then
my question
toss
is,
it
do
on
we
to the
want to
other.
say that we would, do we want to exercise our right in this policy that according to the state law, there will be no alcoholic beverages, but there's a loophole if a nonprofit organization wanted to use our building and
There's no
we want them to.
loophole in that we wouldn't, you're just not going to allow it.
Okay,
But then take it out of the policy.
that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Okay, so which is it that we want to do? Do we want to have our policy without this loophole, or not?
Can we just hold this policy for right now and move on to
Yeah.
the other ones, because we have a lot more to get through?
Yeah.
And since this is going to be
We'll
an
come back to
ongoing-
this after our discussion at the school committee meeting.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute, no. You know why, Katie? Because when I suggested that a few moments ago, we said no. I think what Jim tried to tell us is that we're going to, and we're all very passionate about this issue, and we're going to have that discussion. But right now, under Mass General Law, we have to have this policy. The way this was previously written, we were one of the few. Excuse me, we're one of the few that chose to put this, and we
Yeah.
have this loophole.
Well, both of these statements are law.
Okay.
You cannot have, by law, you can't have alcoholic beverages on school grounds or school buildings unless
Okay.
you've been granted permission by the school committee and granted the license by the licensing authority, which in a town is the board of selectmen.
Right. And Kate's
So,
asking if we want to
Do we want to
prohibit,
do that or not? Okay.
you don't go to the selectmen if the school committee says no.
You have two
Yes,
options
yeah.
here. You either amend this or you vote it out.
Correct. I think Kate's asking whether
So
we
if we
would want to
wanna
vote it out or not.
So, Katie, rather than hold it, which we had originally said, now that we've talked about it, do we want to put it on the,
Jim, is that
button
our
to
two,
vote it out?
am I
or
wrong?
do
Is
we
that our
wanna
two
amend it?
options, amend it or vote it out?
Yeah, we just delete it out of this, and then as we go through the process, it does your
Right.
first reading, second reading, third reading.
All right. So is the consensus to get rid of it? What?
I don't
Mr.
know.
Harvey,
Yep.
you said that these two statements are what? Allowed or not allowed, or I couldn't hear you.
These two statements are law.
Are all, okay.
May I comment on that?
Sure.
The problem we have, because we find this in the zoning bylaws, if the town does not specifically make a statement or find something, you default to the state law. And sometimes the state law is broader than what you wish to implement. And so in a sense, if you set it yourself properly done, you could make it narrower and more prohibitive.
Okay. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So do we want to make it narrow?
We can make it more, we can't make it less than what the state law is.
You can make it more restrictive.
Be more restrictive,
I
yes.
think.
So we could prohibit alcohol at all times, and if you rent the cafeteria for the Lions Club, sorry, there's no alcohol.
Right.
We could do that.
Yeah, yes, we can
And I
make it more
think
restrictive.
Kate's question is, do we want to strike this from here so that it's clear the school committee will not authorize any alcohol on the premises, period? Is that correct, Kate?
Well, if you just took the very first sentence, alcoholic beverages will not be allowed on school premise or in school buildings, and take care of everything, it's just, that's just so clear.
Okay, and then just, all right, we're going to
It's really not
amend
open
it.
to interpretation.
Amend it to delete the rest of the. Neil, is that?
But that,
I just, sorry, I didn't mean to interfere, Mark.
No, I don't.
I've run into this with the zoning
Yeah.
bylaw, as I say, where if you default to the state one, it can be broader. In this case, you're finding a loophole in the existing language.
Right.
And I think properly done, you could remove that.
Remove
part.
it.
Right.
Okay,
So
so then we're going to amend it to delete the rest of it and just say alcoholic beverages will not be allowed on school premises.
But the caveat, please check with your.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
When was the last time anyone ever asked the school committee for alcohol on the premises?
Actually, I think somebody did about a year and a half ago or so. They wanted to have a fundraiser, and we said no.
Okay.
Somebody did kind of, I vaguely, don't hold me to it, Larry.
All right, no problem.
But I know somebody had said something about it, and we said no. If we're going to have zero tolerance, it's zero tolerance. So I don't think it even made it to us per se. It was just kind of bandied around as a fundraiser.
Okay.
So we're gonna delete
Motion
that.
then to amend this? As stated?
Or there's a
We don't
consensus
need
that
the
he's
motion,
rewriting
he's just
it.
gonna
When we're rewriting it, we'll
Okay.
adopt
And then
it.
we'll adopt it
But
with.
we're striking that
But there
second
seems to be a
paragraph out.
consensus on the
Yes.
committee to strike it.
Yeah,
Just make
to
it very
delete.
clear.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Next one.
ADC.
Smoking on school premises?
be happy to tell you I don't have any red marks on this one.
You have what?
I have no red marks on this one. Checking my mouse shut.
Are you going to abstain from this one, Kate?
Yes,
we just need the money for signs. We'd have to put the signage in if we have that last line.
Yeah, you have to have the signs anyway.
Yeah,
Don't we have that? Don't we have signs?
We don't.
At the high school?
Oh, maybe at the high school.
High school. So is that, do we need it at all, in all
Well, you,
buildings?
you do, because you can't have parents smoking, you can't have anybody.
You need
You know how many
signage
times I
and
tell people on school functions, you can't be
You know
smoking
what's the
here?
hardest one is town meeting.
Yeah,
Paul, can you
go
make sure
outside
we
the
get the
parking lot
signs?
and-
We don't have to wait to
Yeah.
get signs made.
no.
Yeah, we should be compliant on that.
Well, I'm the only one that got chili, so.
Yeah, in your office.
That'd be a bad day.
Which leads us to the Corey one, and as I explained at the last meeting, there's two versions of this, the existing Corey policy and then the latest revised policy that we have. Ours is a 3-page one, yours is a 2-page one. And I just point out that the reason we issued an amendment is the underlying language on page 2, which is the protection for people who are victims of identity theft from not gaining a position because their name shows up as an otherwise known as on someone else's criminal record.
Okay.
If we stay on page 1, though, for a second, in your 3-page version, Paul, in the second paragraph, they make reference to taxi cab company employees. And I know that in the past, for Metco students, to get them back to Boston, you've used a taxi cab. Was that person gone through the Corey requirements?
I can answer that.
Okay.
By law, we're required to, and I know it's really, taxi cab.
I know it says we're required to mention if we actually
The
did.
taxi cab is in here because of special needs students, okay? And we have a lease with outside transportation because legally we're responsible. And I do know, and because issues have come up, and occasionally a driver was sent on a last-minute substitution and they were not quarried. And the school has been very, I know, very strict on making sure that all of the drivers from any of those fleets are in fact, for special needs children, are in fact quarried. I'll let you answer Metco.
Well, I'd go to the line above that and say individuals who regularly provide school-related transportation to children.
Right, so the person for the Medco was a regular, so I was just curious
Yeah.
whether that person,
And I can't tell you,
okay.
But you'll look into it.
That that's something.
Okay.
But
we're not doing
if the
it.
taxi cab company was hired
We're
by
not doing that
parents
anyway?
No, we don't do it anymore.
Okay.
Because of
to
cost.
do
Right.
transportation, then you're not the employer. I mean, who's paying the tax, the yellow cab or whatever the company happens to be that puts them up?
I just thought of it because I knew we had the issue with the Medco in the past, so.
But what's the line that you're saying regular use? Where's that?
Right.
Right above it, it's the third line of the second paragraph, individual who regularly provides school-related transportation. And that's, the Criminal Systems Board has defined that as three times. If
Well-
3 times in a year is enough to qualify as regular. And like an individual taxi driver, not the company, but an individual taxi driver.
So you're saying then the less than 3 times if there is a...
The Criminal Systems Board doesn't consider that regularly provided, it's hit or miss.
I guess I'm concerned about that though. So what if it's,
Yeah, but
we as a...
Are you saying we're not using them
we don't do
anyways?
that
We're not
anyway.
using
Oh,
No,
them.
but what
okay.
about the special needs that Kate talked about? Do we do that at all?
No, I'm not aware of
Those are
taxi
done for
cabs.
the contract,
Those,
right?
it's a contract.
And-
So they'd be
and they're-
court.
They need to be quarried to be licensed.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And I know there have been issues where the leasing company had put individuals in, and parents, and I know that we followed up to make sure that we had queries, and there were, a last-minute substitution is one thing, but if this driver is going to drive our students again and again, then they must be quarried, and we actually keep a
Well, that's
record
where the
of,
3 comes in.
we keep a record of that, right, Paul?
So are
That's
we
what I was told
replacing?
before, of the queries.
So we're
what
taking the
detail?
old one out and replacing it.
Right.
Well, our own drivers.
Because the old one doesn't allow the provision for the...
So we just,
Could you just check that again, Paul? Because I was told that we do keep that, we keep a copy of that, because that's the way that we kept monitoring that on the transportation.
And,
All right, so what you're saying is we don't need ours, we'll go with the new one. Okay.
right.
Can I just ask one question? And Michelle, I'd like to ask you, one of the things that, as a principal, you were called on to often explain this policy to our volunteers, to our parents, and to other people. Did you find any difference, any preference between the format of one versus the format of others? Because you'll use this policy on a regular basis. Obviously, some of the rest of
I
us
think
will.
most people understand what it is, and I'd say that most people welcome, the idea of, so it's, I don't.
So as a reference, it didn't matter. I
Well, I
found
didn't
the
use it.
format much easier on the first
It
one.
was.
Okay, versus the second one, which is legally compliant, and I'm glad we added those 2 sentences. But I find this very difficult to follow versus, because they're identical except for that one phrase. I found that this much easier to call and explain to people. Just a format
But
question.
I've never used this one, so I don't know.
Well, it's the same thing, except for that line that we've added, right?
Well, I think it's different.
Well, it's the, as I understand
Oh,
what you
I
told
see
us,
what you're
Jim, it's
saying.
the exact same policy and the wording is the same.
With the
We
exception-
put it, in the old policy, we put it in a format, and my question is, it's a format question, do we want to stay with that ease of use, or do we want to go with the new format as well? The language is pretty much the same.
I thought it was missing more than just
There's a lot of difference between the two.
Yeah. But there's a lot more information in this system.
No problem, I
I
just
mean, there's
wanted to
almost a
raise that
whole
one
more
format.
page of...
I agree. It's
I
easier
find,
to-
because I'm going to bring this up again and again, there's some things that maybe we can combine and do. The format on the first is much easier. The second, that's why I brought that question up. So no one has an issue with it? Let's move on.
I had one question then on the bottom of page 1, the last paragraph. It says the information must be kept in a secure location. What do you mean by secure location? A locked building is a secure location or a locked cabinet? And there's I'm asking, so I'd like to then ask, where is it kept here and are we in compliance today?
It's kept in the superintendent's.
Superintendent's office.
Personal office?
Secrets? It's kept in Wendy's office.
Is it locked? Okay.
Yes.
and it says to be retained for not more than 3 years. Do we routinely purge the
They have
files?
to be redone.
Because they have to be redone.
We have to redo them.
Okay,
So you
but-
would replace the old one with the new one.
Okay, but do we replace it, or do we just keep the old one behind the new one?
No, I think we replaced.
Okay.
Or shred it.
All right, which we should.
These next couple of pages have been recommended by the criminal systems, whatever it is, History Systems Board as addendums to the policy language that they provided to us, the -R, and then the different exhibits, the E1, E2, and E3, so forth. Although the E3 is just a form. I'm not a big fan of putting forms in policy manuals to begin with, so,
So are these all going to be in exhibits?
yes.
That's your proposal, right? Yeah.
That's the recommendation.
So these three would go in exhibits, not here.
Correct. No, the 3 pages of policy, the ADDA-R, and then the E1 and E2. I don't feel you need E3, personally.
You don't need to put it in there?
I don't think you need to put the form in your policy.
Okay.
Right.
Pretty straightforward.
So the Corey requirements, the ADD-R, that is going to go in the policy manual. And how is that not redundant?
The A through I isn't anywhere else.
Okay.
It has to be spelled out.
We're moving on to
Wellness.
wellness?
Yep.
We're going to get close to the finishing aid. And in wellness, we have 2. We have our policy and then your suggested
Well,
policy.
the suggested one, I was so reluctant to even put out a template, mainly because the regulations called for the creation of a local wellness committee.
Right.
And the local wellness committee was supposed to study the district.
Right, which we have.
And come up with a policy that had some minimum requirements to it. But there isn't one of these that looks alike. Because, but that's, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because that was the intent, was that each committee study it individually and review the practices. I had one that went so far as to prohibit the snack bars at the football games from selling fried foods. They had to offer, if they were going to sell fried foods, they had to offer healthy alternatives to fried dough. And, that's how far that policy went.
But ours was just adopted.
Right.
Right, June of
Did you
06.
mention this at the last
Yeah.
meeting, that you
That's
thought
right.
it needed more?
No, actually, I said it's, if it meets what, because the issue with this, it's not supposed to be ever done.
Right.
The wellness committee is not
ongoing.
supposed to go away.
Yeah.
They're supposed to continually review it and update it and make recommendations and review fundraising programs and all the other things about the type of products that are being used. So there's so much of it that is still that's still fluid, that this is fine.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You had said on the 23rd that the real intent with this policy is in fact to have the committee. And Martha, you had made the comment to put that, we're going to put that on the agenda so that we will have the wellness committee. The question was, they've not met, so we were going to ask if they could meet and then give us some recommendations. Could we put that down with, along with the other discipline and all-night graduation and the wellness committee, just so we don't lose that? Because we did talk about it on March 20th.
Because if you look at your number 7, you said in a paragraph, well, I think I took a half a page to do, but part of what they're supposed to do is review the menus of the schools and see if it meets these dietary guidelines and offer a report as to how well the school menus are matching up with that. So that committee is not supposed to just do this.
It shouldn't just go away.
It has an ongoing task.
So in June, they should be coming before us again with another review
Yeah.
of how this.
They may not change the policy,
Right.
but they're supposed to be an
They're supposed to
annual-
stay on top
Yeah.
of what's
Right.
going on.
Then why don't we
in the
keep the
school.
one we have?
Right.
I actually
Move on.
like the new one better than the one we had, with the exception of the new policy doesn't speak to food allergies. I think the draft of this is what Mask offers, it's one of the places where I think Mask did a great job. I would, because it talks about curriculum, it talks about some other things, and the only thing I found it missing is that it missed food allergies. And Martha, remember when we had to do an analysis of the nurses, and we were shocked to find out the number of EpiPens and the number of food allergies in every building.
But that was once they
Some
went
had-
computer and we could actually see it.
Yeah, but because food allergies are an issue, that's the one thing that I'd like to keep from our wellness policy. I really liked what Mass did on this one.
Well, if the committee's going to stay in place, maybe what you can do is have them
Address that.
have them look at it and maybe come back with a
I like
recommendation.
it too, Kate. I thought it was
I
more
really,
detailed than I.
this is what I had asked for. I was the only one that voted against the wellness policy at the
Yeah,
time.
but the hard
But this
part
does it
was,
for
you know,
me.
it's like anything else. When you first develop a policy, you try to put everything in it, you try to do your best, and then, you know, the nice part is you feed off of somebody else afterwards.
Right.
So essentially, that's what we're doing here and beefing it up, so.
But it's coming up for renewal anyway in June.
Right, so leave it for now and let the committee
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we're not
Give them
going to, so who will, you had asked last time, can we make sure that the wellness, I'm just afraid that
Yeah, but
it's
you
the
were
end of the year
representative.
and you have school improvement plans and the wellness committee hasn't had a chance to meet. Can we make sure we give them some notice?
Who's
you
the
make a
chair,
note
who's
of
the
that?
chair, who's on the committee?
Bev.
School
Bev.
committee
I was
member?
I was the school committee member on it, and then it was
How many
the,
people were on it altogether, roughly?
About 7, I think. We had
Okay.
phys ed,
All right, can you put that on there about finding out about the wellness committee meeting and have them look at this policy? Revisit
And it was the
this policy.
assistant superintendent at that point who
Maybe they can
directed us.
incorporate some of this into.
Yeah. One of the things that I think
I would
we did-
incorporate the whole thing, but let them look at it.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things that I think the wellness policy did do is that we spoke specifically to food allergies, pandemic plans, because we're going to be
Yeah.
required to do that
And
every
each
year
school
anyway.
has an emergency
And also
plan, which
emergency
I
plans,
think
and I'd like to make
all
sure
parents would
that
be
we don't,
comfortable knowing that.
I would like to make sure we don't lose
thought that
that
was
from
an
the
important
previous
statement.
policy, because that's the only thing lacking in
And
the
the
mask
testing.
policy, were those three things.
Yeah.
And they tested regularly, the emergency
It's
plans.
funny, the one policy I didn't want to do was the one you liked.
I know. Can we
You get
pick
the
a brain
job.
for a moment, Jim?
sorry?
So we should be telling our wellness committee, I don't want to overtax them, but but they should be looking at menus and
Well,
Martha
part of-
Dooley does that all the time.
But part of the
and keeps
challenge
us-
No, reporting to
is
us,
for
it's
them
all done.
to evaluate does the school meet the established nutritional guidelines?
Yeah, but if you give that responsibility to her, then she should be doing it, and she is. I mean, it's not, granted, if we gotta review it, that's fine, they gotta show it to
But
us.
our policy says that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was reading.
Yeah.
It's
I know.
Martha Dooley does it
It's been a little bone
No, I
of
know she
contention
does.
where
Now,
I think our fat
setting up the
content is
menu,
still
so.
too high. I would love to see that, and I think there
See
are
what?
alternatives. I've never felt that our food was what it should be. Our food service people are wonderful. I would like to see that. I recently called McDonald's and I called Dunkin' Donuts, okay? And I can tell you which one I buy now because of what I found out. I just think our parents, we do have parents who want to know that information, and they can't readily find
And
it.
just, I'm sure she would do it because she does it for our PTOs, so.
She
that
does
would
it
be-
for us, so
yeah.
I'm saying that's something that we should celebrate and give it to parents, because parents do want to know that information.
And I just want you to know that she does do that at our PTO meetings. She comes to our PTO meetings and they actually provide
those.
that information to parents, so.
Send it to us. I've been
Yeah,
looking for that for
that's what I
years.
was gonna say, it'd be easy for her to do
See,
because she.
I graduated from
so.
PTO, so that's where I'm running
Yeah.
behind. As a parent, I don't get the
Drop in
information.
once
They
in a
actually
while.
have sample food and everything there for parents.
I'll go to those
see,
meetings.
yeah.
No, we're gonna start charging.
The last
Okay.
policy in section A,
It seemed awfully vague.
yeah, it's
It's like,
a template policy. The EQA audit people required, they saw this code and they wanted each district to have a commitment to accomplishment policy. It's so individual to the district that we put a template in place, but,
see, our district improvement plan will have all of that in there.
Yeah.
okay.
If you,
So do
unless
we
you
have
can
to
tell
have
me.
this?
You have to have something here.
The district
You can
improvement plan will
extract-
cover the audit.
Then we just need to make that clear.
See district improvement plan?
Commitment to accomplishment, right?
Because my
See, this-
question
Right.
is,
Because we have specific objectives and goals and everything that's in there, it's all measurable now.
So now
in the
that I know
draft.
where it is, I can reword this so that it will
Okay.
just say that
So it
the
links
school
to
committee, blah, blah, blah. It will
Okay.
link it directly back to the district improvement plan.
So you're
Is
going to
that
reword.
district improvement plan?
We have a district improvement plan, which is in draft stage. 2 subcommittee members have looked at it. The
And then
superintendent is going to bring it
School
back.
improvement plan?
That'll come out after the district improvement plan. And that
So
that
that's one
district,
section.
strategic, district, and then school.
DIP, refer to DIP.
Do we want to take a 2-minute break before we go to section B, or?
Yep,
Yes, let's stretch them.
No, they're open around.
down the hall. Okay, I think,
For future meetings, I won't make any plans.
oh, no, don't worry about it, don't worry about it.
You're
Okay,
starting
we're
to know
gonna
this stuff.
wrap this up in about 15 minutes, because we did say till 8:30. All right, take it away, Jim.
There's a couple of policies that lead off this section that aren't required, that you have them. We provide them as a template because districts have asked for them in the past. For example, BA and BAA are not required that you have policies. However, in particular, the evaluation of school committee operational procedure piece, that's kind of a lead by example policy.
It's a good governance policy.
If you're going to expect constant evaluation of the system, and what this talks about is the committee evaluating itself on its process, not on its members.
Right,
Okay.
As a member, you're evaluated at the ballot box.
right.
As a committee, you
Okay.
know, how do your meetings run? Do you feel your meetings are being productive? Are you addressing the targeted goals and objectives that you establish for yourself?
Right.
Things along those lines, so.
The one question I had in that very first sentence, the school committee is responsible to the people whose benefit the school system has been established, to the people for whose benefit. But what about the taxpayer who has no children? We're also responsible to them as well. So I just thought that first sentence should be a little broader, because we're responsible to all the taxpayers in town, those that have children and those who don't have children.
So yeah, I put
Did you have any
taxpayers in
ideas
another
for
one,
how
though.
to maybe reword it, or?
It says people, though. Wouldn't people be parents as well as taxpayers?
Well,
Isn't
but what if you're not a
general-
parent?
How about citizens?
Oh, you're saying taxpayers without
Right, children.
citizens, yes. To
You'd
the
say
citizens.
responsible to the citizens of the community.
Right, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
good.
Yeah. Right. Because you could be someone who lives in an apartment, and your taxes are paid indirectly for your rent, and you're
Right,
still
I got
a
it,
voter.
yeah. That's-
Okay,
Anything else on that page?
nope.
Go for it.
No. BAA. Anything?
Do you have a self-evaluation form that the...
Yes.
Okay, so we could have one of those as a
Form
committee?
is in the back of the orientation book.
Okay.
So anyone that's gone through that program has a
I've
copy
seen it,
already.
I've seen that.
Would we want to
Yeah,
attach it behind
No.
here?
No, don't want to put forms in.
No, because you may want to
don't want
tailor the
forms.
evaluation instrument to your district. I mean,
Yeah.
based on your own stated goals and objectives in your strategic plan.
I just had
Has
one
this ever
thought.
been done?
What?
Not in 11 months, I think.
In the third paragraph,
No, in the 9 years of it.
on the evaluation of school committee operational procedures,
I'm
the
sorry.
third paragraph, it's the last sentence, it says, "At the same time, the committee will set an approximate date on which the next evaluation will be conducted." I think this is a great policy. I'd like us to say that we're going to complete an evaluation annually.
I agree.
Okay?
And it would be nice to do it this time of year.
And just so you know, we have
Oh, yeah, Larry, yes. You know what? We should be doing it timed with the town elections.
Elections, that's
Okay.
correct.
So do we want to say annually? Do we want to specify the time of the year?
Annual,
Well, the committee will set an approximate date.
Okay.
right,
Keep it
annual.
open.
And just so you're aware, we offer the service through the membership to be the facilitator for that. So the individual members fill out the form, send them to us, we compile the results, bring them back to you.
Oh,
But
another
that's-
service you
that's
guys
just through
provide.
your membership.
All right.
Right.
School committee legal status, this is a build-on from the AA policy that was in the previous book. The previous section was talking about the establishment of the public schools. Now, we're talking about how the committee's legal establishment has been created. Again, we try to make this specific. We could say where it says 3, 5, 6, 7, or 9 members of the school committee for 2, we would make that specific to Foxborough.
Right.
Oh,
Five.
thank you.
So 5.
So we say
I put
5.
yellow
good. Yep.
5.
Yep.
Right.
I had it in the right place.
Yeah. I don't like 6,
Okay.
7, 9. No, we can't.
No.
But that's,
five.
I mean, you can have.
Yeah,
I know.
Foxborough shows a 5.
so put 5.
My only question, the very first paragraph, says every town in its annual meeting, isn't it annual election? Or the election for us?
Technically, the election is part of the meeting.
Okay.
At
Even
least
though
that's
that
what the town clerk tells me.
the meeting follows after the election, because that's, when I read it, that's the only thing that
In
confused me.
some places, it's either way.
Can we just say election?
Sure.
Why?
Because it's our election, and then we have our town meeting follows our elections. And when you read that, it makes it seem as if we're voting, where our legal status comes from the town meeting. And Jim says we have a choice.
The state law provides that. Choose by ballot
It's the
its
bylaw.
registered voters.
No, well,
That determines it's 5 people for 3 years.
Actually,
the statute says meeting.
All right, but it is statute.
yeah.
Annual meeting, okay. Leave it at that.
I think it's
That's when you
because
sit for the
usually
first
at
time.
one of the first, I don't know, is town meeting before the election or after?
After.
Week after.
It's always after.
But you
I
don't,
remember that the town meeting always had, the last warrant article was the ballot, was
Yeah.
the election ballot.
so theoretically, you don't take your seat until town meeting, isn't that right, Neil?
I think that's correct.
Yeah, I think that's how it is,
Transfer to it.
yeah.
School committee powers and duties. Again, this is the committee, not the individual, this is the committee. Breaks the responsibilities up into 5 general categories.
I just had a question on number 5. This is just a question, though. I'm not, isn't the committee responsible for establishing policies and adopting goals? Not establishing goals, right? Because the goals are established through the strategic planning committee process, right?
That's a good point, Michelle.
Yeah, responsible for adopting educational goals.
Well, we'll say establishing education policies and adopting goals.
Okay.
The only question I have on this, MASC puts out, pursuant to the regulations, very specific things. When we say what are our 3, more than 3, but our powers and duties. It's budgeting, it's policymaking, it's the superintendent evaluation, it's public relations, it's this educational planning and evaluation. Why wouldn't MASC have used some of that terminology just to make that easier?
Which, this is our terminology.
I know, you've presented us with sheets, and we talk about the budget part, the budget, it's policymaking, it's evaluation of the superintendent as part of our duties and responsibilities. And those are the big, main categories. Why wouldn't we have clearly stated it that way?
This
Can you
came
see
out
it?
before that.
Okay.
and-
So is this the new way that MASC?
No, this has been in existence since ed reform, since 1993.
Okay, so my question is, do you want to have it the way MASC currently does
The
it
question
now, or
is,
is
do
it?
you want to have it the way
Yeah.
we currently have it now?
Okay, that's a
It's
question
your
for the
book.
committee. I personally would like to have
All
had
right.
budget, policy making, superintendent evaluation, public relations, ed planning, however, whatever. I'm sure I've missed a number here, but we talk about this all the time
Okay.
to the community, and I think, I guess we don't, my question is, do we want to keep that lingo, or do we want to change it? Are there any others that I might have missed? So it'd still be 5?
Yep.
Are there any others?
As long as
that
you
should
use
be
the
on
most
there?
current.
I'd use the most current.
Yep.
Okay? Keep going.
That's why we revise
School
them.
committee member authority.
I don't think it is.
There shouldn't be any question on that, right?
No, this is
This is
actually,
ours.
well, it's an identical to ours.
It's identical to
Somewhere, yeah.
yours? Well,
So somewhere along the lines,
We used it.
I love number 5.
And it was only 7 years old.
Number
but
5.
the member authority hasn't changed.
Right.
There has been a legislative action to change the member authority.
maybe we should star that one.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Doesn't that kind of count for
Okay, school committee member qualifications, oath of office. There are some districts that will have this split up, and they'll have the oath of office and all these other things all split up into different titles. We just put them all on one.
I'm comfortable with that.
Resignation,
Resignation, that's fine,
unexpired term,
that's fine.
okay.
Can I ask a question here? Is there a reason that we have to have school committee member resignation separate from unexpired term fulfillment? I mean, we have them.
Yes, it's true, because
They're-
one,
So we're going to keep all of these as separate.
yeah.
Just
Okay.
one thing to remember, though, that on that BBBE, that it was done differently when Vin died, so I don't know if, just something.
Well, that's by vote of the committee. We can do
Chose
that.
not to fill the
We told-
vacancy?
yeah.
Because it was so, was it
So
close
that's-
Closer to the election, it'd be a huge
Yeah,
expense,
the law,
so.
actually, the
okay.
law allows that.
Okay.
Okay. Before we go on, I had another question on BBBE.
Okay.
As provided in the law, the school committee will notify, isn't it the chairman of the Board of Selectmen? Isn't there precedent that says exactly who, or just the Board of Selectmen?
That could be your practice.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because again, the chair has, unless it's provided for by your town bylaws, the chair of the selectmen has no greater authority than the rest of the other members of the board of selectmen. So that just by notifying the chair isn't enough, you have to notify the whole board.
okay. The sentence that reads, "After 2 weeks' notice has been given by the committee to the selectmen, so that voters of the town may have the opportunity to state their candidacy, the two governing bodies will meet to fill the vacancy by roll call vote."
Right.
Okay. Isn't that a backwards sentence?
After 2 weeks?
Shouldn't it say that the two governing bodies will meet to fill the vacancy by roll call vote in no less than 2 weeks, so that voters may have the opportunity to state their candidacy? It's like a backward sentence.
It's yours.
No one cares?
That's our existing policy, you're saying.
So we're going to leave it the way it is?
Yeah.
Just check something.
Change it.
I think you're reading too much into it. After 2 weeks' notice has been given by the committee to the selectmen, that the voters of the town will have the opportunity to state their candidacy, the two governing bodies.
I don't know.
No,
I understand that.
Yeah, it means 2 weeks, yeah, it's fine.
I think that's
Okay.
Actually, the law says 1 week's notice, so you're actually looking at,
two.
More.
Right.
Okay,
Law
the
says
time
one.
being on about 8:30, we will bring up the rest of these with the next meeting.
Copy me the next one?
and we already
Remember
talked
ethics?
about the ethics one at the last meeting.
Yep,
We were just gonna merge, there's a couple of new ones, and
yes.
I like the second version here. I think it's much more succinct.
right, but we were gonna do some additional ones in the Foxborough one we were gonna add and renumber. So it was gonna be kind of a merged document, if
Yep.
everybody remembers.
Yes.
Right.
So that has,
Or something.
That
okay.
hasn't been done yet.
So that hasn't been done yet. So we're going to merge these two.
Right.
Could I just
Okay.
ask one question? Larry alluded to it. I think it's a great idea when we bring in taxpayers. Under A, and it's whether on which version, realize that our primary responsibility to the children, I think it should say to the students of Foxborough Public Schools and the citizens of the town of Foxborough.
Where are you looking at, Kate?
Under
A and
A
one.
or 1 of either version, it says, realize that our primary responsibility is to the children. I think it should read, is to the students of Foxborough Public Schools and the citizens of the town of Foxborough.
You don't have to,
Okay.
because he's going to be doing it.
You're taking really good. So we got to,
Okay, so we got to
Start up with work in the safe.
the clips, and then
BDA.
BDAA, right? Okay. All right, everybody knows when the next meeting is? It is May 4th. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So made?